What's going on, beautiful people? This is the Perspective Chasers podcast, and I'm your host, John. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing accepting yourself and self-love. I've separated the two because I think they are two different things, and I'll discuss that later. As always, a quick update on the podcast and behind the scenes. Editing's becoming very repetitive. Because I don't do too much editing through the middle of the videos, a lot of the editing tends to be around the beginning and end. I'm going to start to look into maybe a bit more interesting ways to edit and a few more ways to kind of produce a bit better content. But that's going to be a learning journey. I feel that I've kind of got into the routine of just rough editing episodes now, so hopefully I'll start to progress into kind of editing them to a bit of a higher standard over the coming weeks. In terms of feedback, there's still the problem with the lighting. The last couple of episodes are waiting to go up while I'm recording this one, so I'm hoping there's a bit better feedback on those ones. But if it means I have to invest in a light in future, I will, but please let me know how you feel about the lighting at the minute. Other than that, there's not much I can kind of say about behind the scenes kind of thing. I'm definitely feel like I'm finding a bit more of my groove now. I've had a little bit of time, or I've made a bit more time this week to get a few episodes recorded and to kind of give myself a bit of a head start. So I'm hoping in future that I can keep that ball rolling and kind of stay ahead of myself and keep that breathing room. But other than that, there's not much to say on in terms of behind the scenes. As far as I personally go, mentally this is really doing me good now. Like it is rough, don't get me wrong. Like again, having the expectations for myself to sit down and record and know what to say and go through everything, and it's a lot to juggle, but setting those low expectations of one a week and kind of building from there is really starting to work. Obviously it's still a stumble at the beginning to kind of make sure it's part of the routine, but I think I'm now at a point where I plan to put time for a podcast into my week or into the day if I can, and I'm constantly editing little bits if I can throughout the day whenever I get snippets of time. So the biggest hurdle for me is finding the time to actually sit down in front of the camera where I've got silence and where I'm alone and I can just do my thing. Majority of the time I've got my daughter, so I don't want to have her on camera. It's my decision to do this podcast and to kind of do this for hopefully a living eventually, but just do this in general. And me personally, I don't want to put her on camera until, or if she's able to acknowledge what she's doing. To me, that's just her decision, as this is my decision. So once she can kind of decide what she wants to do, there may be a bit more that I share to the world about her and things like that. But at the minute, she's still very young. So for the most part, I'll keep everything in that regard private because of her own privacy. But I will kind of share as much from the kind of learning of becoming a dad as I have, because that's been a massive part of my life and a very integral turning point. But juggling kind of dad life, work life, and doing the podcast and still trying to be John at the end of the day, like it takes some working and a bit of juggling and mishmashing and a bit of compromise. But I feel like I'm finding a groove. So it's mentally starting this podcast and actually getting things on the way has really been good for me in that sense. I think that's going to be it for the beginning jibber jabber. And we're actually going to get into the episode about accepting yourself and self-love. So let's start with accepting yourself before we get into the idea of self-love. Because there are going to be parts about yourself that are harder to accept than others. We can't choose, for the most part, how we are. Again, like when I say this, I mean, you can't choose where you're born. You can't choose your skin color. Well, you can choose your gender these days or choose to change your gender. But that's a very complicated topic that for now, I'm not going to get into. But there's a lot of things that initially are out of your control. And accepting what is within your control and what isn't, that is going to be a lot of the beginning of learning to love yourself. So for me, I grew up, my dad died when I was 1, and my mum raised me for the rest of her life. She was severely disabled. Her mum had rubella while she was pregnant, so it caused her to be, when she was born, her body was disfigured. And she spent the first 5 years of her life in and out of hospital, having multiple corrective surgeries, and really, like, I don't know how she went through it, but every doctor that they spoke to at those times, this is back in the 60s, would never have kind of, they'd have never granted my mum the quality of life that she ended up having because of her resilience, because there was parts of herself that she accepted, i.e. she accepted her disability for what it was, but she also accepted that it was down to her to find the boundaries of that. And she really was my biggest teacher in life. And it wasn't until she passed away that a lot of what she taught me started to actually resonate. The only way that I can explain it is, you don't know if a book is good until you get to the end page. And as crazy and as sad as that may sound, it is very true. I understand my mum far more after she passed away than I did in her lifetime, because I actually stand back and look at her life as a whole. And when I look at her life at the point of what she accepted compared to what she didn't, like, don't get me wrong, she had a very hard life and things took their toll on her. And there was after a certain amount of time, there was more leniencies and her quality of life deteriorated. But that initial point of pushing yourself beyond anybody's expectations, not because of their benefits, but because you know the bounds of yourself, accepting what you know you're capable of and what you're not capable of. Like, she went on to have children, ride horses, walk around, do things, all of these things doctors said she would never do, but she went and done every single one of them. She didn't allow people's opinions and thoughts, no matter of their caliber of education or the kind of commitment that they delivered the information with. She found out for herself. And for me, that's a big life motto, is there's only one way to find out, and that's to do it. And looking back, that comes from her, because time and time again, no matter what people said, that stubborn lady would prove them wrong over and over and over again. And that's what I grew up watching. So when I was facing my own struggles, for me it was eczema. I had severe eczema when I was a kid, and the only way I could ever explain it to people was, it was as literally as if my blood boiled under my skin and it would literally break the skin. When I was about, must have been between 5 and 7, I ended up in hospital with severe eczema, and I was wrapped in bandages every single day. There was a lot of pain in that, and I had to accept the fact that 3 or 4 times a day as a little kid, I was put through nearly unbearable pain, where all of the scabs from the eczema was ripped off of my body by this, me and my mum used to call it olden day ice cream. There was these yellow bandages that they was cold to the touch, and they was just this really kind of raw mesh with this thick, pasty yellow cream. It was absolutely horrendous. and it would dry onto the skin. And when it would dry, it would literally grab hold of all of the scabs and pull them off. And I would turn from white to red probably about 3 to 4 times a day. And over time, I quite literally developed thick skin. But there was a time where I felt sorry for myself, and that it was the case of, why me? Why do I have to be the one with eczema? And this kind of went on through my childhood until it got to the point of, when I was an early teenager, I started to think, why not me? Like, for more than just eczema, for my dad passed away when I was 1, and this, that, and everything else, like, anything bad that happens, your instinct is to ask, why me? And to essentially feel bad for yourself. But lo and behold, like, the truth is, why not you? Like, why should I have been the exception who didn't face anything traumatic in my childhood, or didn't go through any pain or suffering? Or it's just part of life. And sometimes that's the hand that you're dealt. You can either cry about it or you can get on with it. And crying about it ain't going to get you anywhere. So get on with it. Once you accept the parts of you that are as they are, like, you probably stress more about the things that bother you about yourself than anybody else does. So learning to accept them for what they are and understand that it doesn't change who you are. Whereas no matter your affliction, no matter what it is that you feel makes you stand out or makes you not like yourself or love yourself or accept yourself, it's never going to be as bad as you think it is to everybody else. Where we all operate from our individual perspective, to you it seems like the end of the world. When you're in pain, it feels like the whole world is going to end. When you're going through suffering or this and that, it feels like the beginning and end of everything. But that's only for you, or for that one person in that moment. Everything else still revolves and still moves around. Not around yourself. I had to correct myself from stop saying that, but everything still keeps spinning. All the cogs keep on turning despite whether you stop or not. So once you can get past that, it's not normally that big of a deal. Like, I know people that have overcome massive adversity, and it's never from crying, why me? So learning to kind of accept that you are where you are, or you've got what you've got, or you are who you are. That power of accepting that starting position, that's when you can start to make change. Because until you get to that point, you don't think there's a problem, or you don't know there's a way to solve the problem. You need to get to that point where you can say, okay, look, for example, I'm John, I'm this, I'm that, I'm good at this, I'm bad at that, this is how I correct it, so on and so forth. Until you start identifying it and accepting that that is your starting position, you'll never get over that hurdle. Again, to relate it to my own life with a bit more specifics, with this podcast, I still struggle to clarify it as a podcast. And when I'm talking to people and that, they're like, well, no, you do have a podcast, like da 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 da. But to me, it's not established yet. But I need to accept the fact that I'll never actually have a podcast properly unless I start things like this and push through this kind of mental barrier where I'm kind of unsure of myself. We're always going to be unsure of ourselves. But unless you push through that, you're never going to become sure of yourself. Until I sit here and get comfortable with talking to the camera and have X amount of time in front of the camera, I'm never going to find a way to communicate properly when I'm sitting here on my own. Don't get me wrong, I love sitting talking to people, and I will do that when I can. But it's about accepting where I am and building up from that. So to get on to the loving yourself part, probably the deepest way that I can start this is And again, don't nitpick for the variations of twins and things like that. But for the most part, you're born into this world, you come in alone. You're going to leave this world alone. There's one person that is with you 24/7, and it is you. So if you can't tolerate and you can't bear that person, it's going to be hell for you. That's the one person that you're stuck with. Whether you like it or not, as much as other people come and go and fade in and fade out of your life, you're stuck with yourself. So unless you can learn to understand yourself, appreciate yourself, and love yourself for who you are or who you can be, you're forever going to be stuck in this cycle. And normally the cycle presents as outward projection of hatred or negativity towards others. It's probably very rare to see somebody that is truly happy in their life and happy with themselves project negatively onto somebody else. Because that's what most people do, is they project outwards. These inner conflicts, their inner frustrations, they push it out because it's easier to push it outwards and blame an external force than it is to take responsibility and accept that sometimes you're the problem. Again, I said sometimes. You're not always going to be the problem, but you need to be wise enough to understand when you are a problem and when something else is the problem. You are the master of your destiny. As much as there is other variabilities, you decide what you do. Somebody can give you option 1 and option 2. If neither of those suit your desires, you can make option 3, but you have to have the initiative to do it. That person's only going to have that 1 and 2 for you. So it's not down to them to offer more. If you want something different, go get it yourself. And that's where it comes back to loving yourself. There's only going to be one person that is truly going to have your best intentions at heart. And that is you, in my opinion anyway. Because everyone else comes and goes. From my experience in my life so far, again, it's not been a bad life. There are parts that have been up and down and everything, but it's not been a bad life overall. And the more that I kind of go through life, understand who I want in my life and what I want in my life, the better things get. But it's down to me to do that and understand and appreciate myself and know what I want in my life. Sorry, that's kind of tangented off from directly talking about loving yourself. But again, it's a complicated topic to tell somebody how to love themselves. Like, there's different things that you will do that you appreciate you for, or there should be. Like, it's easy to get caught up in doing things for everybody else and being a people pleaser and thinking that if you fix everything around you, that everything is going to be good. But until you fix you, you can't fix others. I always try to say to people, a drowning man cannot save another drowning man. Like, first you need to learn how to swim and then you can save the person. First you need to help yourself and then you can help somebody else. If you jump in the water and you can't swim, well, guess what? You've now made the problem worse. So first save yourself and then you can save others. If you're struggling with how to save yourself, start small. Do the little things. Learn to appreciate yourself. How do you appreciate yourself? Do things that you appreciate. So in terms, for myself, to relate it to a real world situation, my mornings were chaotic and I was rushing around for work and this, that and everything else. So guess what? Half hour, an hour of the day before, I would prepare things for work. Put my work washing out, put my food out, this, that and everything else, so that things were ready. And yeah, at the beginning it sounds like a task. But once I wake up in the morning and I ain't got to rush around looking for everything and it's all just there and I don't have to think about what I'm going to get for lunch or waste money on getting lunch out at work because I have lunch ready. Like, those little things you start to appreciate yourself for. And then it's like, well, I'd done that for me so that I could have a better time now. And the more you do those little things, the more you start to appreciate yourself and the things that you're doing for yourself, the more that self-love, in my experience, will increase. So do that across the board. If you haven't bought yourself anything nice in a while, find a way to treat yourself. Like, make time for you, make space for you, make money for you. Like, unless you're doing this for you, why are you doing it? It has to start with an intention to help yourself, love yourself, and be complete in yourself before you try share onto each other. Otherwise, you're just sharing something empty. Like, if you don't love yourself, how can you truly love somebody else? Because you're not going to understand, again, this is all my opinion, but you're not going to understand what love is if you can't even love yourself. Like, how are you meant to prioritize somebody else when you can't even prioritize yourself? These are all hierarchies in life where you need to understand, like, for me, my daughter is my highest priority. She comes before me. She eats before I do. She sleeps before I do. She is clothed before I am. Like, and that is fine. I accept that. It doesn't mean I value myself any less. It's just I have somebody that I value more than myself. And that's fine. But again, it's a moving scale. So just because I have love for her, it doesn't mean that there's none left for myself. I still need to find time for myself and for me to be John, because I'm not always a dad. And that was a massive learning curve for me, because you feel like you're being selfish by taking time for yourself. But then unless you take time for yourself, you can't be complete or relaxed or whole in order to be better for them. So for example, if I don't have time away from my daughter to work and generate money and provide her with a decent quality of life, she's not going to have a decent quality of life. And then I'm going to blame myself and project onto her that things are rough and I'm going to be a miserable parent. Whereas if I have the foresight and push for the standard that I want to set for myself and the standard that I want to set for her, and appreciate myself for the effort that I put in to get there, it becomes incredibly hard not to love and appreciate myself, because I understand the effort that I'm putting into life, not just my life, but my daughter's life and the lives of the people around me. That it's very rare that I do an action that I regret. And it's very rare that I have an interaction that I regret. There's always something to be learned, but at the same time, if you think about how you carry yourself and you deal with your problems first, there tends to be less overspill. So I very rarely snap at somebody when it's not their fault, or misdirect things like anger or just emotions in general, because I deal with them at the time. If somebody annoys me, I tell that person. And this is the thing where it's still trying to learn how to convey myself on camera, because there's still that I'm walking on eggshells. I'm trying to say what I want to say, but not how I'd always say it. How I'd say things normally would probably be more direct, a bit more brutal, but that's not always an approach that's going to work, even with myself. So sometimes when I'm having a go at myself, tough love works. Telling myself to knuckle down and suck it up, buttercup, it's time to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and put the nose to the grindstone. Sometimes that's what I need. But other times I need to have a bit of empathy, a bit of understanding, and a bit of being realistic with what I'm doing and what's in my kind of wheelhouse and capabilities at the minute. Again, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day. There's only so much that you can push yourself before you literally burn out. And I've experienced that burnout over and over and over again. It's not fun. I used to really like pushing the limits of how far I could push my body. I would work ridiculous amounts of hours, train in the gym for ridiculous amounts of hours, and just work myself like a machine. There's no fun to that. Eventually you lose sight of why you're doing it. And if I'm being completely honest, at that time was probably when I was struggling with loving myself the most. Because I struggled accepting myself. I wanted to change myself, and that doesn't mean at the minute there's not things I want to change about myself, but they don't bother me and they don't make me think less of myself. Again, it's an area of improvement. It doesn't mean that I'm any less of a person for not achieving that yet, or do you know what I mean? There's no takeaway now when I criticize myself. Not when I effectively criticize anyway. And if I am being overly brutal on myself, I try to step back. Maybe I'll talk to somebody about how I'm feeling about myself, and normally it's probably going to be Dave, or more than likely Dave. But it's one of those things where it's always that kind of feedback loop of personal development of, okay, this is what I done and this is why I'm feeling like that. Again, like doing this podcast makes me feel great. And then I'll check something, like I'll see how many views it's had or how many subscribers I've got. And all of a sudden I'll feel low. But then I had no expectation, like the views and the likes and everything else have already surpassed my current expectations because I didn't really set any yet. Like, I'm trying to get to 10 episodes before I really push things. So any headway that I make now is gravy. It's all just icing on the cake. But I lost sight of that and I started to kind of put myself down and self-deprecate, and there was no need for it. So then I was talking back and forth with Dave, and like once I'd said it out loud, I realized the contradiction within it. I realized how ridiculous I was being, and how, again, it was just my misconstrued expectations of myself and what was actually going on that had me feeling this way. So there was no reason for me to be getting wound up. Yet I was there experiencing frustration and everything else for the simple fact of I didn't have the right amount of perspective at that time, or I lost sight of the perspective, or lost sight of what I'm doing, because you get caught up in everything else. I got sidetracked. Again, I think it's very clear to everybody now that I get sidetracked. There's probably a few hours of footage of me getting sidetracked now. But again, I accept that that's me. Sometimes that's going to happen. Doesn't mean I missed my target or I can't build off of it. That's why I like doing this kind of raw edit where it's minimal editing and I only edit out what I have to edit out, because it gives me the kind of, one, the freedom to put things out a bit quicker, but it also kind of pushes me to, I lost my train of thought. Well, that happens. I'm completely off topic now. Anyway, I was meant to be talking about self-love and I've just gone on a massive tangent. But what else can I say about self-love? Do the little things for yourself where you're gonna appreciate them. Have the difficult conversations with the people that are close to you in your life that are gonna improve your overall experience. And again, last episode I was talking about your expectations, so understand that it's not somebody else's obligation to make you happy or fix your problems. But just, if you're trying to improve how you're managing yourself and how you manage other people and how other people treat you and you treat yourself, let people know. Get that feedback loop. Again, have a Dave in your life. Have somebody that you can talk to that no matter what you spill out, they'll come back with their input, or they'll just be an ear for you to listen to, just like I do for him. Like, it's that constant back and forth that every now and then you need to offload. And I think that's why I like this podcast so much, because like I said before, a lot of the time it's just me and my daughter and she's still young. So an in-depth conversation's not going to happen right now. So having this podcast is a way for me to offload. But it took effort to get to here, to give me this, in order to have this platform to offload. And I'm still learning how to offload effectively, not just selfishly offload, but offload in a way that's going to benefit other people. like I say, there's, especially in terms of my mum, there's a lot that lady taught me that I think the world could benefit from. I mean, she faced so much adversity in her life, and she was such a pure human being in that sense. Like, you could never meet somebody sitting there in so much pain, but still be the first person to ask you how you're doing as soon as you walk in a room. Like, that amount of selflessness is something the world could really do with right now, because I really think it's missing in it. Self-love, again, gone off topic, but it all kind of comes from it starting to accept yourself. I really do think that, and doing the little things that you appreciate for yourself and making the effort for you. It's easy to do things for other people. It's easy to appreciate others and kind of do things for them and forget about doing stuff for yourself. So make time for you. No matter what it is in life that you do, no matter what you've got going on, there's going to be a little bit of time where you just need to work on you. Whatever it is. It could be working on your car, it could be going to the gym, it could be going for a swim, a run, anything. But find that thing that makes you feel like you and do it as much as you can. And appreciate yourself. Put in the effort for you. I'm sorry, but if you've been to work and you're tired, you've still got to find time for you. You've still got to find time to feed yourself, clean yourself, relax, everything else. Put in the effort for you. You put in the effort if you're getting paid. So why not put in the effort to improve your quality of life, or improve your mental state, or how you feel about yourself? That's going to take you far further than doing a bit of overtime would. Alright guys, I've gone on enough tangents, so I think I'm going to leave that episode here. So the seed for this episode is treat yourself as if you was somebody you loved. As if you was a partner or a family member or somebody that you held really near and dear to your heart. Somebody that you put in the effort for. Treat yourself as if you was that person. For 1 week, act to yourself as if you was acting to that person. Put in that caliber of effort put in the caliber of effort that you put into somebody else or into your work directly into yourself, and see the difference that it makes. All the best. Catch you later.